Welcome back to Nuclear News. The big question is, why are uranium stock prices so weak? Why do prices feel like they only fall? Well, this explains exactly what is going on with uranium stock price action, right? The Sprott June Uranium Miners ETF is up 43%, outperforming the entire stock market, the broader stock market, the S&P 500, which is only up 25%, right? So why in the short term is it correcting? Well, it's the exact same reason the 20-plus year Treasury bond ETF did poorly last week up until June 12th, right? We'll talk about what happened on June 12th. But look, from the start of the week, 93, hit a low of 91. Look at the chart of the Sprott June Uranium Miners ETF last week. Start of the week, 27, low of 24. Personally, I'd want to be in the more volatile assets as long as they're more high quality, because it means they're going to have that volatility to the upside as well, right? So obviously we would expect a high risk, high reward asset like the Uranium Junior Miners ETF to be much more volatile than the US bond ETF, right? So it fell more. June 12th, it pumped. What is going on June 12th? Cryptocurrencies fall as investors wait Fed decision. This was June 11th. Bitcoin dips under 67K. Look at the chart of Bitcoin over the last week. Starting at 69, hit a low of 66 right before June 12th. So what happened on June 12th? Obviously, everything is correlated to the macro environment. Some assets are riskier, have more of a high risk reward. Some assets aren't as risky, but everything follows the exact same trend, right? And so what happened on June 12th? Stocks surged after CPI on June 12th with Fed looming. So CPI, that's what the whole market was waiting for. June 12th, would inflation be higher than expected or lower than expected? If inflation's higher than expected, it means interest rates are going to have to stay high. Interest rates are the oxygen of the financial system. So if they're high, it costs more to borrow money. People can't borrow as much. The entire economy constricts, right? So that is why junior uranium miners, which need capital, don't do well. It's also why bonds don't do well. It's also why crypto doesn't do well. Anything early stage, practically anything won't do great in that type of environment, right? Except for the big tech monopolies, of course, right? Now, what happened on June 12th? Stocks surged because CPI, inflation, came in lower than expected, which means maybe the Federal Reserve won't have to keep rates higher for longer, right? The sooner they drop interest rates, what's going to happen? Bonds are going to rally, crypto is going to rally, junior uranium miners, ETFs are going to rally. Now, over the long term, uranium miners have been a great place to park capital over the last 1 year, again, up 43%. And so long term, this is all just short-term noise. We're all correlated to the macro environment in the short term, but long term, the broader fundamental picture plays out. That's why we stay on top of exactly what is going on with this space weekly. And this is the main reason to stay on top of uranium in particular. Uranium is going to be like oil and gas in the 1950s. Why is it going to be like oil and gas in the 1950s? Because currently it's set up to be the fuel that powers everything. Just like oil and gas were going to be the fuel that powers everything back in the 1950s. Here's an example of how uranium is going to power everything. Core Power targets $10 billion order book for nuclear shipping by 2030. UK-based startup Core Power CEO told a press conference that the company is expecting to see its first orders for vessels, massive shipping vessels equipped with nuclear reactors, before 2030. This includes floating nuclear reactors and nuclear-powered ships, right? So uranium is going to be powering shipping fleets in the future. They're trying to move away from oil and gas. They're trying to move to the new world fuel. Power-hungry tech centers spur U.S. talks with big tech. Power-hungry data centers. Uranium is going to be powering that. Philippines sees nuclear as long-term replacement for liquid natural gas. Nuclear is the long-term replacement for oil and gas. That's why it's the oil and gas of the 1950s today. That's why it's that early stage. Nuclear energy trends in the U.S. are bullish for uranium, says Citigroup. What are the nuclear energy trends in the US? Well, the US may revive some shut nuclear plants to help meet emissions goal. Energy chief says they're reviving shuttered nuclear plants, increasing the demand for uranium. Constellation Energy considers 3 Mile Island restart. This is the one that had that big issue a while back, right? They're talking about restarting it. That's how much people need nuclear power. That's how much the world is going to be relying on uranium. Climate bill could give boost to nuclear power in New England. Lawmakers are set to add nuclear power to the state-approved list of clean energy sources, enabling nuclear plants to compete for more contracts. And Massachusetts tries to clean up its energy grid. We're just getting started. Governments are pouring a huge amount of capital into nuclear energy, making uranium more desirable and therefore scarcer and scarcer. Belgium's nuclear reactors will no longer use Russian uranium. We've been talking over the last few weeks about how we're in a global supply deficit, and the US just banned Russian uranium. Now Europe's trying to move away from Russian uranium. So what happens in that situation is the supply deficit in the West gets amplified, right? Because Russian uranium was a huge chunk of the supply of uranium in the West. That's gone. We already had a global supply deficit. Prices were already skyrocketing in the uranium spot price. Well, now in the West, take away Russian uranium, it gets scarcer and scarcer. Maybe not in the East, but Europe and the United States are going to have to pay a lot of money. That's why in the last few weeks, we've been talking about how the US government has been pumping money into a domestic supply chain and actually buying uranium, right? We have Wall Street buying uranium. We have utilities starting to buy uranium. And so in the short term, uranium stocks are going to be correlated to the macro environment and the broader financial system. But in the long term, as more and more of these utilities pay more and more for uranium, it's obviously going to be very good for the miners. Thank you for watching. That's why we stay on top of what's going on weekly in this space.